Hello, and welcome back to another episode of 10-Minute Concert Insights, Schubert Club's online version of the traditional pre-concert talk. My name is Mark Bilyeu, and I'm pleased to join you for the next installment in this season's International Artist Series, welcoming the Norwegian pianist Leif Ove Andsnes. The program opens with Edvard Grieg's piano sonata. Grieg showed real promise as a young pianist and was sent to Leipzig to study at the newly established conservatory. "I was a dreamer, without any talent for the battle of life," he wrote. "I was awkward, sluggish, unattractive, and quite unteachable. I left the Leipzig Conservatory just as stupid as I entered it. Naturally, I did learn something there, but my individuality was still a closed book to me." Things turned around for Grieg when he moved to Copenhagen. His health was returning after a long battle with pleurisy and tuberculosis. He began studying with a new composition teacher, and he became reacquainted with his first cousin, Nina. The two became romantically involved, much to the disappointment of their families. Aside from the discomfort of the familial ties, her parents believed Nina could do better. Her mom has the best quote: "He has nothing, he cannot do anything, and he makes music nobody cares to listen to." Ouch. Despite the protestations, the two wed in 1867 with no family in attendance. A few years prior, just a month before their engagement, the 22-year-old Edvard completed his first and only piano sonata. The work opens with not so much an homage to his soon-to-be fiancée, but rather his personal signature, his own initials. Take a look at the opening motif here in the right hand. These three notes of a descending melody happen to spell out Grieg's initials: E, H, which in German is B, and G. Edvard Hagerup Grieg. The third movement is perhaps the most curious, as it's marked as a minuet, but sounds generally nothing like a minuet. We have a real treat, and that is a recording Grieg himself made of this movement on a gramophone recorder at the beginning of the 20th century. Geert Tveit might not be a familiar name to you. He wasn't familiar to me before this program. Like Grieg, he was born in Bergen, Norway, just 1 year after Grieg's death. And like Grieg, Tveit moved to Leipzig to study at the conservatory. And, as if that wasn't enough, like Grieg, he was also unimpressed with the school there. While their musical languages were radically different, both Grieg and Tveit were committed to a nationalist perspective. Tveit actually altered his name to be more Norwegian, changing his first name from Nils to Geir, and then doubling the final consonants of each his first and last name. For Grieg, nationalism was a selling point, but for Tveit, in the post-World War II era, nationalism was uncomfortable and unfashionable, and his reputation, income, and in turn his mental health suffered in his adulthood because of it. As a child, though, he was precocious. As a teenager, he got a job at the local cinema to accompany silent films, but Tveit's compositional fantasy sometimes seduced him far from the screen action, and his hammering away during the love scenes did not go down too well with the public. After college, he moved from Leipzig to Paris, where he studied with Villalobos, Arthur Honegger, and Nadia Boulanger, a pretty exceptional cadre of mentors. He toured Europe as a pianist, often programming his own music, and eventually made his way back to Norway. He is most known throughout the country for being a radio personality. He was hired by the national broadcaster as an associate producer who crafted shows on Norwegian folk music, a sort of Studs Terkel meets Ira Glass meets Bill McLaughlin situation. In 1970, a fire in his studio decimated an estimated 80% of his works and ostensibly ended his career. What remains of his work is what he had already sent to his publishers before the fire, including the Piano Sonata number 29 on this program. Now, it's impossible to know if there were 28 other sonatas lost in the fire. It's certainly possible. As Leif Ove Andsnes suggests, Tveit was among the century's greatest composer-pianists, alongside Bartók, Britten, Prokofiev, and Rachmaninoff. It's also possible that the sonata was given the number 29 as a signifier of importance. As Andsnes also says, perhaps he is referencing Beethoven's Piano Sonata number 29, the Hammerklavier Sonata, Beethoven's largest sonata in a way. It even has the opus number 129, so I believe this was him playing with numbers and signifying that this is his big piece. The work capitalizes on only 2 themes for its 3 movements. The second movement is my personal favorite. Take a look at the score here. The pianist is instructed to hold down a whole slew of notes with their forearm, and we are given this charming drawing to let us know. Additionally, you can see these dotted crescendo decrescendos. Now, if you know anything about a piano, you know that a piano note, once struck, can't get any louder. That's the gift bestowed upon an organ. Now, Tveit suggests in the footnote here that this can be achieved with a radio transmitting device. There is a recording available online of the composer playing this sonata where he does this exact thing. I'm not sure if this will be the case when Mr. Andsnes performs it, but I can't wait to find out. The program closes with Chopin's 24 preludes. All of them. It's pretty unusual to hear all 24 of these gems played on a single concert like this. There is no evidence that the composer ever intended for them to be played in their entirety. And in fact, Chopin himself only ever played no more than 4 on a single program. But that doesn't mean it shouldn't be done. Chopin wrote these, at least some of these, during a stint on the island of Majorca with the writer George Sand, in what turned out to be a rather miserable trip for the 2 lovers. The weather was horrible, their lodgings were questionable. The local Catholics on the island were upset because these 2 unmarried folks were amongst them not attending church, and Chopin's piano was over a month late to arrive. Yet, in early 1839, Chopin wrote to his publisher that the preludes were ready, and they needed them. Chopin had funded the trip on the advance from the publishers. It's impossible to talk about all 24 of the preludes here. You've got the famous Raindrop Prelude, a name not given by Chopin. You've got the ones that sound like etudes, the ones that are mazurkas, and the ones that are less than 30 seconds long. Chopin took with him to Majorca a copy of Bach's Preludes and Fugues, so we know he had those works on his mind. But the scope of Chopin's preludes would have made Bach's head spin, I think. Number 4 was heard at Chopin's funeral, and maybe in your own childhood piano lessons, which is not to be confused with my personal favorite, number 20, which Hans von Bülow dubbed the Funeral March, and which Rachmaninoff turned into a set of variations. It is, I also assume, Barry Manilow's favorite prelude of the set, as he used this C minor prelude as the basis for his 1972 chart-topping hit, Could It Be Magic, as he explains here.
I wrote this next tune with a friend of mine. Her name is Adrian Anderson, and we both wrote it in collaboration with a man named Frederick Chopin. What I mean by that is that I took the melody from a Chopin prelude. It's the Chopin prelude in C minor, if anybody cares. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to play the prelude for you first, and then I'll show you the song. It's called Could It Be Magic?
This song was later turned into a disco hit by Donna Summer in 1974, which I highly recommend. And then, 10 years after that, it was used as inspiration for the video game Ghosts and Goblins for the Commodore 64 console. Take a listen. I'm pretty sure hearing his music in 8-bit would have made Chopin's head spin. An outstanding program by an artist of the first order. Exactly what you'd expect here at the Schubert Club. We'll see you at the Ordway.